Hello and welcome to another episode of Page Burners. We are working our way through the Malazan books by Steven Erikson and Ian Esselmont. We're currently on Deadhouse Gates by Steven Erikson, second book of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. We are reading all of them in publication order. And we read about 100 pages or so in the mass market editions of the Malazan Book of the Fallen every week. Today's discussions are going to be chapters 19 through 21. My name is Varsha. I have
Good
to
work.
remember
You got
what
there.
to say. Yes, I got there. My name is Varsha. I run the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain, and I'm on a few podcasts like Speculative Speculations and this one, and a few others that Steve runs. And we also usually go around and discuss what we are most excited to talk about from the day's chapters. Um, Today, for me, that will be the sleight of hand. I would like to understand that a little bit more. The sleight of hand that Duiker and Lull talked about. Carl, over to you.
Well, first of all, I realize it's been a few weeks, I think, since we have given you your due as our adjunct. So Varsha is, in fact, the adjunct of this company of Marines, and she keeps us in line. So you wouldn't believe the things we put up with behind the scenes, but that's just how it goes.
I thought this was heading somewhere nice and sweet for me.
Absolutely. Sir, yes, sir. But yeah, no, I'm Carl. I wrote a fantasy book, Truth of Crowns. You can find out there. Otherwise, I am, happy member of the Page Chewing Forum and community, and I am most excited to talk about Coltaine and his fate, and just what an absolute breathtaking chapter that is, and sequence of events. It's really powerful stuff. Steve.
Yeah, I'm Steve from Page Chewing, and happy to be here. And of course, the adjunct is in the house, so we have to behave. I am most excited to probably discuss what happened at the end of chapter 19, because I'm a little bit hazy on the second half or so. I'm not quite following, but yeah. Shannon, who you take it away?
Steve, I'm Shannon. I've written nothing. I've read a lot. And I think I'm most excited. Well, we can't all say the same thing about chapter 21, so I guess I'll be most excited to talk about what's going on with Dasimulter's daughter in the Deadhouse. That was interesting.
Yes, that was a good one. And Jared is joining us today for the first time. And this is usually what we do, Jared, but since you're not really reading the chapters along with us, you can just pick a general topic that applies to the book. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we read you read chapter 19,
Yeah.
20, and 21. Is that right?
Yes.
That's right.
I mean, the obviously the death of Coltaine is what is one of the most impactful things ever. So would love to hear you guys' thoughts on that. And I'm on the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and I am currently reading a small book called Truth of Crowns right now.
Oh, really?
Oh, nice.
Oh, that's right. No, you did tell me
Small.
that. Yeah. Yeah, small. It's actually smaller than Deadhouse. So,
Yes.
That's
you
true.
know,
Yes,
For
we
Malazan,
are talking
it's a small book.
relativity here. So
yeah,
Basically a novella.
yeah.
exactly.
Better font size in the book, too.
That's true. That's true. Much more readable font size.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, with all that said, chapter 19, which starts with the aftermath of the river crossing with the blood and the butterflies making its way down and making it known that something bad and horrible happened. Bad and horrible, good order, Varsha. But something bad happened in that area. And we get this beautiful line: horror knew no sides, played no favorites. And then a bit about Tavor too. A Malazan fleet was on its way, commanded by a woman hard as iron. Discuss.
Oh man, this is a tough one because there's a lot I want to say, but it's tough to say without either the full book spoilers or certainly even full series spoilers. But we are getting to Vor, right? She's on her way, and I think it is not a spoiler to say that we will get to meet her properly eventually, although she did appear at the start of this book. And I am very excited for that. And she is a character I think the fandom talks about a lot for good reason.
Yeah. And this characterization of her already, I think we heard about her some in the previous set of chapters where I forget who it was. I think it was a conversation on the boat that Kalam was on about how the soldiers that she's bringing in her ships are going to wreak havoc among Shaik's troops because of what Coltaine had to go through and like basically get revenge for Coltaine. Really, I think it should start with Bomb Qual, but we'll get there. But yeah, but this characterization of her as a woman hard as iron, which we, I think, are already led to think as readers from the prologue with how she treated Felisin and everything from there on. And I guess there's a conversation between Shaik/Felisin and Heberic about what damage Tavor can do when she does show up. And Heberic talks about how she's shown what she's already shown what she's capable of by doing what she did to Felisin. So hard as iron. We'll get more of that. But meanwhile, all of this leads to a conversation between, I think it's Captain Lull and Duiker about being human, pretty much. He said, I think it's Lull. He says, "How does a mortal make answer to what his or her kind are capable of? Does each of us, soldier or no, reach a point when all that we've seen, survived, changes us inside, irrevocably changes us?" Me is here. He
I was
introduced
going to say,
himself in a
we're leading up to sleight of hand, and we had a bit of sleight of hand here.
yeah. Dan showed up.
You already started discussing?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
well, okay.
Did you
Oh, well,
see?
I only connected to say that I forgot to read for this week. I realized this morning, and then I didn't have enough time.
No problem. It happens. Do you want to stay on and get spoiled for like 3 chapters? It's fine. Or you can read while you listen.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to dip, I guess.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
See you next
This
week.
might be the funniest thing that's ever happened during a live recording. So thank you, Dan.
But we haven't started yet. Okay. Later.
Okay. See you. Okay.
He came like the wind, and like the wind, he was gone again.
What makes us human? Dan showing up and saying, "I forgot to read." Yeah. And to which Duiker answers sleight of hand, right? Like, how do we... I have to say, I don't think I fully followed that conversation. I feel like something very profound is being said, but I don't understand it.
This is definitely one of those conversations where I feel Eriksen maybe overly understates something, because I think what he's trying to say is straightforward, but he's obscuring it by having the characters not like explicitly discuss it, which is very much part of his style. He likes to leave things largely as subtext or to be understated. it's mildly frustrating to me, although I do think it's a great passage and great like it's wonderful. Just because I don't think it's overly complex, and I unless I'm misinterpreting it, because I did reread it a few times actually. I bumped up against this while we were reading because I was like, what is he saying? Like what's this about? And I think it's just about like, because the context for the sleight of hand is, being like a child watching illusionists and stage magicians do their tricks, perform their sleight of hand. And I think the point is just not succumbing to despair by taking pleasure in the little wonders of the world, the little wonders specifically that like humans can do. I recently went to a magic show actually, and it is amazing what some of these people can do. Like, it's something that you very easily could just like, I almost feel like it's given kind of a bad rap by like some of the really bad magicians, but like if you go to Vegas, or if you're lucky enough in your city to have like a real proper like adult magic show, it's or an all ages one for that matter, it's crazy what some of these people can pull off. And I think that's kind of what it's about, is still having that sense of childlike wonder in you, but the focus on sleight of hand and that's repeated multiple times, I feel like kind of obscures that, because it makes it sound like, I mean, I guess in some ways it's like the individual is also committing a sort of sleight of hand on themselves by kind of tricking themselves. So maybe that's kind of why that is the phrase that's focused on, but I don't know. I mean, maybe that's just how I read it. So I don't know if someone else has a different reading. I could totally be wrong. What are your thoughts? Anyone have thoughts?
Feeling like a classroom teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Students? Anyone?
Anyone? All right. Sorry, were you saying something, Shannon?
No, I just said that sounds good.
Okay.
Don't
Yeah,
have anything to add.
I think that makes sense. I didn't quite go in the sense of wonder direction. I was thinking more in terms of the second half of it, which is to pretend that this is not happening, even like sleight of hand, the act of deception. But that seems sort of out of character for Dwecker. Like that doesn't seem like a good answer for the question posed. So maybe the sense of wonder thing makes more sense. I like how he concludes it, and I think it is in line with what he says in the end, that if you find yourself laughing and wanting to cry at the same time, then you found it. That's what you found. I guess yeah, it's about finding meaning in like the smaller things, and maybe the bigger things will come together, perhaps. I don't know. But yeah, that was an interesting conversation that I feel like I would get a lot more if I actually understood. But even just the way to getting to the end of it had a lot of like little profound tidbits,
I think that's why it frustrates me, is because I feel like there's so much there that's really great and it's really rich, and it's just left a little too vague what's being said. But at the same time, that's okay. It's not like like an objectively like right or wrong thing. It's just like for my taste. Exactly, it takes away from the enjoyment a little bit to like not be able to understand what's actually being discussed fully. Although you certainly can interpret it, but even then, I'm like doubtful and not as moved, or just because I'm so caught up in trying to understand, like thinking about like what is being said here. But that's just that's an Eriksen thing.
Yeah,
and it leads to a lot of great stuff, because he respects his audience, and a lot of writers don't, right? He doesn't hold your hand, and I think that's wonderful. But
he does often do that thing where you're being introduced to a conversation between two characters who know things that they know the other character knows these things, so they're not going to repeat to this other character what they already know. And they're in the
Right.
it's like walking into a middle of a conversation between two people on the street, and you know, they're talking about something that you don't know about, and he's giving you that realistic interpretation of their conversation, and he's giving you little hints about what they might be talking about, and you interpreted very well what you thought they were talking about, and some of the symbolism and some of the meanings and what they were saying, and so that what you got away from that conversation is very legitimate in and of itself, and I think that's part of the wonder that Eriksen's trying to put into those moments. Whether or not they succeed for each individual reader is up to the reader, but
I want to actually bounce off something you said, because I'm going to take back something I said, which is it frustrates me because I'm not in the moment as much. I actually think the thing that bothers me about this in this particular time, it does frustrate me a little bit because I'm like not as in the moment, because I'm taken out of it. I'm thinking like, what are they talking about? What are they saying? I don't understand what they're saying. But another part of it is because often that is a very realistic thing. And I read that and I don't understand how Lowell isn't like, what the hell are you saying, Duiker? Right? Like he just like intrinsically understands.
yeah, exactly,
And,
like two friends would, yeah,
right, I
yeah,
guess. And
yeah.
but like it's and maybe, yeah, maybe that is like, I don't know. Because I feel like the metaphor is so opaque, or the way Duiker says it, it's its meaning is kind of opaque, that I feel like if I was Lowell in that moment having that conversation with Duiker, I'd be like, "What? I'm sorry. Treat me like an idiot. What are you saying?" you know. But that's just me. At the same time, I think it's great. I think there's a lot of really wonderful stuff there, and certainly the subject matter I think is potent. Not least because it. I think a lot of people, when they talk about philosophizing in fiction, it can feel like people, when it's done poorly, it feels like someone's just standing on a soapbox. But what's so great about this is it feels very true to the characters and the situation. And similarly, it's very true and very real and honest for the reader, because this book is hard to read. I don't mean in terms of it being bad. I mean in terms of it is bleak. It is heavy. I saw someone on Reddit actually commenting about how they didn't really enjoy the book because it was just so much, emotionally. It was just miserable to read. And when you are faced with something like that, you are naturally like it's natural to ask those questions, like how do you even go on? Like how do you not go insane? As a human being, how do you not lose faith in all of us? And so, yeah, I just want to highlight that as to contrast my mild criticism. It's also like this is how you do philosophizing in fiction.
Mm.
Make it honest for the reader and the characters in the moment.
Yeah, I like that. And what's also sort of interesting about what you said, Jared, about us sort of like just being privy to a conversation between the two people. It is exactly that. We are sort of overhearing, if you will, that conversation. It's not directed at the reader. It's not really sort of it's not reorganized and restructured for us to understand. We're just sort of like listening in and making of it what we can, I guess. And that's cool. That's an interesting style for sure, and adds a lot of depth to the world and the characters, I think.
Absolutely.
And then the captain gets demoted. Oh, this is one of my favorite scenes in the book. The captain of the engineers gets demoted, and the sergeant gets promoted, but admonished that she must always listen to her now sergeant. What did you think of that scene, Steve?
You're muted.
I was a little bit lost on this one with all the different conversations I was getting lost with, because like we mentioned, they talk to each other because they all know what they're saying, but we don't really know. And I was trying to keep up on this one.
Oh, the sleight of hand or the engineers getting promoted / demoted?
The sleight of hand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was me too. I was lost. I also, like Carl, reread it a few times and I didn't get it. And then when they referenced it again at the end of the section with the sappers, I still didn't get it.
Yeah.
uh, but yes, I was waiting for this scene pretty much the entire book. When we had the scene with Gessler and Stormy and Coltaine trying to promote those guys and he punched them in the face. I thought that I had misremembered this scene as that one, but no, it's here. It's hilarious.
Yeah, I thought this came way earlier than it
Yeah.
did. This is also a scene I've been waiting the entire book to get to.
Right? Yeah. And I keep talking about images stuck in my head from these books. This is one of them. Coltaine and a bunch of engineers who are finally tracked down and they have a conversation about I don't know, trying to promote them for bravery. Oh, and here's the other thing that I didn't fully understand. When who is it? Lull explains to Wiccan how he actually did the man a favor by demoting him because now he's returned to the ranks and that lifted every one of them up. Why is that? More silence.
I thought everyone froze for a minute.
Just
I didn't
asking
quite get that
impossible
either.
questions. Yeah.
I didn't understand that.
I would interpret that as, on some way, they're all equal, and while there is a hierarchy, it's rewarding like good performance. It's meritocracy, I think. I mean, obviously, it's not meritocracy in terms of the top dog getting demoted, but I think it's maybe more the sense that, like, they're all, like, none of them are above anyone else, right? They're all in this together, and their work can result in a promotion, and I don't know. That's just kind of how I interpret it. It's like the playing field is even among them, and that there's a sense of mutual respect and admiration, regardless of rank.
Yeah. Yep. That makes sense.
So Steve, what Varsha was asking you earlier, what did you make of this scene? Did you find it funny?
I have a hard. This is the thing with the humor in this book, that I always read it very seriously, and I don't always pick up on the humor until after. I feel like I'm better at picking up the humor because in Gardens of the Moon, I didn't pick up on a lot of it until you mentioned how funny it was. So I was like, what am I missing? So I'm trying not to read everything so seriously. Maybe it's because we just finished the second Apocalypse and there's like zero humor in that series. But I feel like I'm getting better at picking up the kind of dry humor and just trying to be more open to it. So I feel like I miss a lot of the humor just because I read everything very seriously, and then I'd miss the kind of the back and forth. The banter between the soldiers is one that I'm picking up more and more on, the kind of like little digs they have at each other in really stressful moments.
This is one of the places where I actually feel Eriksen's very understated writing style really pays off. It's because you can miss some of the humor. Like, I know on my first read through, there's a lot of jokes I missed. But when you do get it, there's like an added level of, like, I think sometimes comedy can feel less funny, can be less funny because it's like, haha, I'm making a joke, laugh now. It's really in your face, as opposed to this where it's like, it is so understated. It leaves it to you so that when you're like picking up on it, it's like funnier for having, you're in on the joke with them, right? Like it feels more honest in that way. Although certainly, right, there are times where like you're reading it and you don't even realize, this is a joke. Like I've absolutely been in that boat, Steve. And I will say, I think the books get funnier as they go along. So Gardens was like relatively, it's probably his least funny book.
Yeah. You can say that again.
Yeah, that was the main thing I actually picked up on a reread was how funny these books are. Because you don't, on the first time through, you're expecting this big, huge, epic, dark story, and that's what it is for the most part. But there's a lot of humor in these books, and yeah, like you said, Kyle, the humor picks up as the series goes on, as in contrast to the stakes picking up as well, and
Yeah.
and some of the horrible things that happen also get enhanced as the series goes on, and but the humor does as well, and so it's really the second time through, I latched on to those funny moments, and this what you were talking about was one of them. This is the one where the soldiers, they refused to get promoted, or they got demoted, and they were happy about it.
Yeah, so the engineers, they don't show up to meetings whenever Coltaine has them, right? Like the captain of the
Yes,
engineers never shows up. They eventually track them down, the entire group of sappers, and then Coltaine says, we noticed more leadership among one of you, like one of you led the group better than anyone else did. So I'm going to not hear a word against it. I now make you sergeant. And then one of them steps forward and says, well, just a moment ago he was captain. And
that's
so,
right. Right, I remember that now. Yeah. And the
then he
funny
wants
thing about
the
that
sergeant, who just
to
happens to be
replace
named Bungle, to be promoted.
Yeah,
it's great. It is so funny.
And the funny thing about that is, remember in Gardens of the Moon, the soldiers were talking about what happens to a lot of officers, and it's not usually a good thing. And so
Right.
these Marines, these sappers, and these engineers, they already have something against somebody being an officer amongst them, and so why would they want to become one? Because that was like explained in Guards of the Moon when Paran first came upon the people,
especially with the bridge burners, because they just kept
the bridge
getting
burners, yeah.
Ugh.
So it's
yeah.
a Malazan thing. It's a soldier thing, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm the last thing I was just going to say about part of the brilliance of this passage is, I mean, Shannon and Varsha, you commented on how this came a lot later than you remembered it, and the same for me. I mean, I'm not going to say I was expecting this the entire book, but once I got to the scene, I was like, oh yeah, this scene, this is awesome. And I also had a vague memory of it coming earlier, but I think it works as well as it does because of the payoff. You spent this entire book like, where is the captain of the engineers?
Yeah.
Who is this guy? And then simultaneously you have Coltaine being the most serious, aloof motherfucker. And you love him, and you gradually come to love him, right? But he is hard as rock. And the payoff is he finally breaks down laughing, like full throttle laughter. And I love it. And it is just such, it's not only funny, it's moving. Like, I don't know about you guys, but like I was emotionally moved seeing Coltaine laugh.
Yes.
At the end of all this horror. And it's only more powerful because of what follows.
Yeah. Like this line, Coltaine stared a moment longer, then swung around and met Duiker's eyes with such comic pleasure that the historian's exhaustion was simply swept away. And I think a little bit of the reader's sloggy feeling, maybe, because we've been through some difficult chapters, and then we get this at the end of it. And we've got a lot worse coming, which we'll talk about. But Yeah, this was a perfect, little bit of a palate cleanser between the two horrid battles, especially with a chapter that starts by talking about how horror knows no sides, and it
Mhm.
the river of butterflies and blood equally terrified people from both sides of the war. And
I also want to
I
just like
guess one other
briefly.
thing I wanted. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to briefly touch on it, like again, just in terms of the mastery of Eriksen's craft. That something I was taught was if you're going to write something very dark, very heavy, it is almost necessary to introduce elements of levity to give the audience a break, and at the same time to make the grief they feel, the sadness, the anger, more powerful. And so it is not a coincidence that he put this scene right after this horrible massacre, right? And also right before the tragic ending of the Chain of Dogs. This is put here as this, breath, right? As this moment of relief amidst everything. And it's a testament to his abilities, not only that it is as funny as it is, but that he placed it here, that he had the sense and the wisdom to know that we needed this before everything falls apart.
Yeah, yep. And if I remember correctly, I think it was about this book. I think when Erikson wrote it, I heard him say in an interview that when he wrote it, he forgot to give the sappers a captain. And then when he realized that, he went back and backfilled those moments with them just like never showing up and added this moment of comedy. If I remember correctly, I think
That's awesome.
that's the story behind this, which, oh, what good use he put that to.
Brilliant. That's brilliant.
That's correct. Yeah, he
Mm.
forgot to put him in the first meeting, and so then he just made a running joke out of it. It's
And
perfect.
and the last thing I want to say about the scenes with the engineers is that this is a sample of Malazan sappers, right? The independent and free spirits that they are. And Fiddler is a sapper, and he's constantly referenced as the sapper. So I think this is giving us some insight into sort of the free spirit, independent nature of Fiddler too. And I really like that window, additional window into his personality through these guys.
I also just want to like very briefly say, in case any listener, this is their first time reading the series, and like me, when they started this series, they did not know what a sapper is, and I looked this up. It is someone who deals with explosives, and they're engineer. They're also like often they work with engineers to build bridges and walls and whatever the army needs. But sappers specifically deal with explosives. So if you don't know, that's what it is.
And the engineers in a previous scene, or slash sappers, they sat down and wept when their last cusser ran out.
Yeah.
Mostly because they had to do all the digging by hand now.
I love the sappers.
Yes.
They are just so good.
Yep. I do too. So
Next.
the jagged, the how do I say it? Jagut. That's my way of pronunciation. I will die on that hill. The Jagut who is guiding List. Yeah, List, the father, whose son was buried alive in this area, and his torment of 200,000 years is so intense that all the spirits have fled from this land. What is, how List finds his purpose now? I wonder what that is. I don't remember if we ever go back to that. Maybe we will.
Yeah. It's I think it's like he's living out kind of what this person did, and this Jagged, like this noble last stand defending the people. Like this Jagged failed to protect the people he cared about, or she cared about. I forget, is it the wife or the husband? And so he now wants to do that.
Oh, that's why. Okay, that's what he meant by. I thought he's off doing something for the Jagged. Yeah, fine. I'll say it that way. But the what was I gonna say? So now, okay, that's why he's going to be part of the group that's defending against the army of the apocalypse. Okay. I thought he
That's
was
how I
off
read it.
on a personal mission, but this makes more sense. Yeah. And I think we heard this before, but they covered the area with ice. They kept trying to fight off the Tilanamas by just building defenses, but they weren't left alone. And I like this little bit of knowledge that the Tilanamas, they were just annoyed at the Jagged because they didn't give them attention. They thought like they looked down upon them like they would upon ants. They were just as important or not important to them as ants were, and the Tilanamas were like, how dare you, I will show you, I will kill all of you. and then they went on to do that for 200,000 years. Oh man.
I will say it's tough reading about the Talani Mass and not feeling a strong sense of revulsion for their actions because they are so cruel. However, I will say I think we haven't yet fully gotten their perspective on things. I think it is notable that POV, that reasoning for the genocide, is given from the Jagged perspective, effectively, the Jagged spirit. I mean, I'm very strongly, like, this is one of those, like, easy moral lines for me, where I'm like, I don't care what your reasoning is, trying to wipe out every last Jagged in existence is reprehensible. But I think, as we will discover, there is a little bit more going on there with them.
Yeah. There are several things here that are interesting and evoking revulsion, like you said, right? One, that this agenda of theirs has lasted 200,000 years. They became undead at least that long ago, right? Because it was the Tilan Emas who waged war on these Jagged. So it's been at least that long that they've been undead. And the other thing, like the realization that Lon has in that the humans in this world are the descendants of the Tilanimas. So potentially they've inherited the tendencies, which I think we are witness to from this book, the tendencies of the Imas for vengeance and waging potentially seemingly meaningless war. And there might be more to it there, but their inability to call an end to it and say enough, I think, is what we are observing in the humans, at least in this book, possibly in later books too.
Yeah, and I mean, there is that question, right, of are humans or the Talani Mass ever capable of letting something go? You know, are they capable of overcoming that obscene, violent instinct? And certainly this book doesn't seem to think, it's not very positive in that regard.
Yeah, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And just when you think that you have relief, Coltaine gets, oh my god, it was Corbelo Dom, whatever he does. We'll get there.
Corbelo Dom, more like Corbelo Dumb. I'll be here all week.
What, to get beat up for that?
I do. Yeah, I do. I get beat up every night this week for that one. That's the reason I'm here all week. I'm trying to get out, but they won't let me.
And then we get to the Kundal, whose only purpose in life is to measure which the most valiant tribe is. And oh man, what an ending to this chapter. I think this is the chapter 19 ending that Steve wanted to talk about too. When they come and let Coltaine know that the Wiccans are the best tribe. So help me understand this, and then we'll get to Steve's question, because I have the mic. But
yes, sir, adjunct, sir.
that too, I'm the adjunct. But so here's my understanding of what happened. The Kundal, they didn't want to fight any specific people. They just wanted to measure the strength of various people. And it's possible that the Wiccans weren't even, I mean, they were, according to the Kundal, they were among the tribes that they wanted to measure themselves against. But they didn't battle against the Wiccans, right? They battled against all the others, all the tribes of the apocalypse. And the Wiccans battled against them too, not against the Kundal though. Or did they like split off into different parts? And one side battled against the apocalypse and the other side battled against the Wiccans. And then they determined that the Wiccans were the bravest of them all. Wow. lots of silences today.
We're just in awe of you, adjuncts.
Okay, right.
You know, this is one I struggled with too. I'm not gonna lie. I don't feel confident in interpreting this. I mean, I definitely think it's some, like you said, Varsha, just some level of like they admired the Malazan's courage, but I am a little unclear on exactly how that all played out.
Do any of you, Shannon or the observer to the adjunct, as Jared is now calling himself, and Steve, do you guys have any thoughts on this?
Steve, what was your question exactly?
Just exactly what happens. There's some mentions of kind of. I get a little bit confused with all the different people and all the different motivations of everyone because what they say isn't necessarily what they're actually doing. So I'm just the end of kind of with the politics with Coltaine, the statements that are made about that the Empress cannot lose to Coltaine. I was a little lost in that one.
Well, it cannot lose Coltaine. So
Lose
as in
Coltaine.
like
right, I wrote it down.
As in yeah. So that one is like he's too important. Like he's now this symbol to the Malazans, and like if they lost him, as you know, unfortunately they do, like I mean that's a huge blow to morale, to who they are. You know, he's this symbol now for them, and he is struck down.
I completely either misread that or wrote it down wrong, so never mind.
All good. That happens.
That reminds me, this is also the chapter where the Tregale Guild shows up. Yay!
Yay!
What do you guys think of that?
I loved it, and I think the humor was one of the things that really made it work, because it on one hand it's like the most Deus Ex Machina thing we've seen, I think, so far. We're on our last legs, we're done, and then all of a sudden these carriages pop out with like bags of holding full of water, and but I just loved it. I ate that scene up. Like, it was so great.
On my first read through, I really bumped up against it for the Deus Ex Machina reasons. Like, there's no setup. I don't even know if they're ever mentioned before this point. However, this time it hit me a lot harder. I think because of why they're there. That it is it's organized by Quickben, we are told, but it's the Darus, the citizens of Darujistan, the ruling council, right, who put this money together, an enormous sum, to pay this trade guild to help people, strangers, who in many ways are their enemy. across the continent. And we were talking about, can humans overcome their most base instincts and violent drives? In many ways, this is one of the most, if not the most noble things in the whole book. And it is based around a merchant's guild, a kooky little merchant's guild, right? But the emotion behind it is this unbelievable generosity of spirit of people who are literally the enemies of the Malazans. And that is fantastic. And I think that is what makes it work for me as well now, is the meaning behind it.
That's very well said, Kyle. Because I know I think that's probably one of the biggest complaints I may have heard about this book is that Deus Ex Machina aspect to the guild showing up with relief like that, and it gets explained also and further on, but for this at this point right now, you really wonder if you don't remember just little tiny tidbit details from the Ends of God to the Moon and maybe earlier on in this book, I'm not sure, but it really that's a pretty good explanation in a thematic sense to their the appropriateness of their appearance and their placement in the story.
Yeah. And this is also, I think, a sense of release that we were talking about earlier, right? There's comedy, of course, but there's also the need to just, for a second, let them breathe so we can breathe and stop us from feeling so trapped with them. And I think it's done brilliantly along with the humor, and I do think it is set up a little bit in this book, because we are told in both places that they show up that Quickpen had some role to play in sending these guys, right? And Quickpen had a conversation with Kalam on the boat, where he finds out their current situation and decides to do something about it, presumably because these guys showed up. So I don't think I guess the criticism in general about Deus Ex Machina implies came out of nowhere, like without any setup, maybe to, like, that's usually part of the criticism, but I think at least in this case there's at least some setup preceding it. But and I don't know enough about that trope to say whether it is or isn't here, but I do think that whatever it is, it works. It works in a lot of ways. It works in terms of, like, the release that we need. At least I needed that, just like to get a moment to stop and breathe, because oh man, if that had followed immediately after the Vather crossing, the thing that happens with Coltaine, I don't know. I don't know how much of a broken person I would have been at the end of the book. Like, that break was necessary. And also, I guess this feature comes up in later books, so it's an interesting time to introduce it, I think.
Yeah, I think in the most literal sense of the trope, it is a Deus Ex Machina in that there's a little bit of setup in that Quickben is aware of their dire straits, and I think it's also reasonable in a logical sense that people would have heard about what's going on, and so you can understand them then being motivated to do it. I feel like if you were to, like, any the only thing that I really think could be missing from this is just mentioning the trade guild a couple times earlier in the novel, and I don't know, maybe they are mentioned in passing, but like I think it's the trade guild less than someone like seeking to help them that feels like it comes out of nowhere. At the same time, I think there's a meta aspect to this that's interesting, which is this book, I don't think this is a spoiler, takes place concurrently at the same time as Memories of Ice, the next book, right? And Eriksen actually, fun little fact for people who don't know, Eriksen was originally planning to follow Gardens of the Moon up with Memories of Ice. That was his original book too. And his computer drive broke down or something. It crashed and he lost all of his progress. And needless to say, he was very upset. And so he couldn't just go back to Memories of Ice. But he had a contract. He had to write another book. So he decided to write what was going to be the third book as the second, Deadhouse Gates. And so I'm sure in his original imagining, events that you may or may not see in Memories of Ice. I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler because we know Quickbin is the one who gets them going, would have happened in Memories of Ice, right? So you would have already seen it and then it wouldn't have come out of nowhere. So that's one of the weird, structure, metafictional aspects to all of this too. So it's not, I don't know that it's the neatest way of handling it, but it is, like you said, Farsha, it's a breath, right? Amidst it all, it's a release. And
yeah,
I think
I
it
very
is
much
meaningful.
agree with Varsha that it's a break, it's a breath, especially between what we've just done and then what's coming in chapter 21. It's kind of like this rest we have before things get really bad. But also, I did want to also say, I know the caravan leader, he admits he embellishes stuff a little bit, but I think it's important to note that he's bringing in this outside perspective that people all, at least all through the Empire or all through Genebacus know what's going on here.
Yeah.
Because this has been going on for months and months and months at this point. And that I think it goes to explain why, how Coltaine is, as we saw earlier, ascending. Because people know his name, people know this plight, and people are like, wow, he's protecting these people. And so I think it kind of also explains that.
That's a great point. Yeah, he's becoming legendary, not just along the chain of dogs, but throughout the world.
Yep. There are people willing to send him help, even if the High Fist isn't among those people. Scumbag.
So did we answer any of your questions, Steve?
Scumbag. Yeah, I think I must have misread that line about Coltaine and the Empress because I wrote it down so I can be sure to ask it, and I either misread it, I wrote it down wrong, or something because the wires got crossed. But yeah, that makes a lot more sense. I was really confused with that. With that line, just that one little word will make a big difference. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
I confused myself for no reason.
Yeah, it went from the Emperor wanting to protect Coltaine to Coltaine wanting to kill the Empress.
I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What did I miss?
Just the one word. We talk about one-line changes in code that can really bring down the whole system. This is like that.
Absolutely.
I was so confused. I'm like, what did I what?
That changes the entire meaning. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Do we want to rewind to the middle of chapter 19 and talk about
Did we miss something?
the Azath house?
Oh yeah.
Moby.
Moby, yes, is actually a demon. That
Yes,
past
Moby is a
keeps
demon.
insisting
returned.
that
On the topic of Moby, I did want to say I was so bummed out I just got it today exposed to the theory that Moby maybe was who was writing the epitaphs at the beginning of chapter 20, talking about the Path of Hands. And then I went to the Malazan wiki and I saw somebody said, that apparently Eriksen has said no, there is no connection between Trout, Senal, Bokarala, and Moby the Bucklerai.
Yeah.
Oh, wow,
So
that would have been a great
by that.
theory.
I was really, I thought for a second like, oh, that is so cool. Like Moby, all these years later, because he's they leave off in chapter 20 with him. I'm like, oh, this is him in the future. No, it's not. I don't know who Trout, Senal, Bokarala was, but not Moby.
Death of the author.
Yes.
Eriksen, we're just
sorry.
going to ignore him on this.
Yeah.
Hairlock Reborn. Moby is the Bokarala guy.
Correct.
Yep.
I'm sorry, but Eriksen is just wrong about.
Yeah, that
Sorry,
was my favorite
Shannon.
theory I've come across.
I love this. Yeah, I didn't go there, but I was very, very amused by the name of this author. The Trout and Senal, which of course I read Senile, Bokara. So Moby grew up and became a senile Bokarala and then decided to do some writing.
And he
And
named himself after a fish.
that's true. After that little Dendrabi thing that terrified him because he wanted to overcome his demons.
That's so moving. I love it.
There we
Yes.
go.
This is the power of death of the author. This is why the author must die.
This is why.
I will
Headcanon
say,
is real canon.
yes, thank you, Shannon, for introducing that theory, because I, not for the first time, noticed that epigraph and noticed the name of the author, and I was like, what? How is that his last name? What does that mean? Like, I remember the very first time I read this book, I like stumbled over that. I was like, what is going on there? Like, the implications are crazy. Why is he named after a species of animal, and why is his first name Trout? Like, what? I love it. I
Well,
love your theory. Like,
according to-
adds an interesting color to it.
Well, I don't know. I missed this, but apparently on the wiki it did say that this guy was a diverse that could turn into Bokalarai. Like that's
Oh.
so I guess that explains the name. But
That does
I
explain
also
it.
Interesting.
missed that. So
Nope, none of that is true. It's Moby.
Yeah,
We know it.
it's Moby. Yeah,
We know
Moby.
it. We know what's what.
we are here at Page Burners. We create our own canon.
Correct. Head of
We do.
Reborn. And Moby is this guy. But I thought maybe it's like, you know how I can't remember one, but sometimes animals or species are named after the biologists who discover them or whatever. I thought maybe it's that kind of situation here. The Bokarala are named after this guy.
That's an interesting idea too. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the diverse theory less than both of the theories which is discussed here. So
100%.
you know what's true here. All right, so back to the Azath house and Moby. Oh, and the moment when Crocus, that was both funny and poignant at the same time when Crocus says goodbye to Moby and he's worried about how
Yeah.
lonely he's going to be. But then he needn't have worried because that suit of armor talked to him and said, "Little one, I'm glad you're here."
That is such a good scene.
Yes.
On so many levels for all the reasons you mentioned. And I'm a sucker for the trope of whether it's played in a creepy way or in a touching way like it is here, where there is a suit of armor in the background. And then after the characters leave, the camera hangs on the suit of armor and it moves. And in this case, it talks. And it is a lonely person in a suit of armor. And they now have a friend. And it's just such a touching moment, especially after, Crocus being like, he's going to be so lonely. I don't want to leave him behind.
I love that. Crocus is really growing on me in this book. I don't think I even cared that he existed my first time around. But
I'm still there, Varsha. I'm right now. I don't care he exists, but you love him. Good for you.
what you did find that scene with Moby so touching and heartbreaking.
No.
I love it. I'm a sucker for dumbass teenage boys. Maybe there's still a dumbass teenage boy inside me. So I love Crocus.
Some of my nephews have grown up to be dumbass teenage boys. maybe that's where my affection for him is coming from.
Exactly. I knew so many wonderful, good-hearted, absolute dipshit teenage boys, and I was definitely one of them. So it's Crocus. I love him. I've always loved him.
And I love this constant running thread that he always knows more and understands more than the people with him expect that he has, which is quite brilliant. And maybe he can put that to use. I don't think he knows that he's being so severely underestimated. We didn't get any Crocus perspectives in this book, did we?
No.
Just from the outside.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, and everybody's just kind of thinking, "Oh, dumb boy, barely notice he exists too." Oh, he said something. How did he know that? I was just thinking that in my in my head. I was having these profound thoughts, and the kid already knew that.
I love that too. I think it's great. I mean, talk about another trope of that, like the person who acts really stupid actually like is more intelligent than they let on. But I do think it's really potent with this like teenager who I think regardless of the gender, people tend to look down on teenagers, children in general. And I think children are often more insightful or notice more than they let on. That doesn't change the fact that they'll do really stupid things and they'll, act in really hormonal and dumb ways. And, there are lots of things they don't know. But I do still distinctly like, I'm 27, so not quite a decade out from being a teenager. But I do remember being a teenager and being like, I notice more than like the adults around me realize I do or give me credit for. And it always infuriated me, even though I knew that there were also things I wasn't understanding, right? That I was still a kid. And so I love that about Crocus as well, that it feels very honest to me, that he is simultaneously extremely stupid, but also very insightful. That feels very true to a teenager and really people in general, you could say. A lot of people are very dumb, but also capable of great wisdom.
Kyle, you must have been a special kid because I was dumb as a rock at 7.
No, don't get me wrong. I was really stupid and I did a lot of stupid stuff, but
I had no idea what was going on.
Steve, you laughed through a lot of that. What additional thoughts do you have on Crocus?
I love Crocus. I think I loved him in Guardians of the Moon. I thought he was very charming and goofy and dumbass. And I usually aren't a fan of teenagers, but here I am defending Felisin every week. And
I love it.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I love Crocus. I think I really fell for him in the first book. All the dumb things he does, and like he just, I don't know. I just think he's a charming dumbass. Like, I don't know, he's just fun. Hopefully, he doesn't die.
I think that I wouldn't have done anything better than Crocus by far. So,
valid. Yeah, no, for sure.
Crocus is much smarter than I was.
I just love, I think what makes him so likable to me too is that he does mean really well. Like, he really does have a good heart. And so a lot of the stupid stuff he does, it's because he's like, he's stupid and inexperienced and like hormonal, and he is obsessed with girls, and so he like is driven by that, and yet he really does want the best for the people around him, and that's just so charming to me, the mix of absolute dumbassery and a truly good heart.
And to be fair, in this book, we haven't really seen him be a dumbass. We've just seen everybody else really underestimate him and be surprised by him. I think our impressions of him are still carrying over from the first book. And Steve is laughing again. Explain yourself, Steve.
You said we really haven't seen him be a dumbass, but this is funny.
Yes. Yeah, good kid, Crocus. I like him. And okay, so here's the other thing, that starting from Crocus, but I think this more applies to. I was reading some 1-star reviews because I enjoy torturing myself like that, but some of them were talking about how the characters all feel cardboard cutout, and I think their reasoning was there are so many of them I can't tell them apart, and I can kind of see how that might be true maybe on a first read, but it doesn't last if you like stay with the character for long enough. But I'm noticing things about characters this time around that maybe sort of went over my head the first time because I'm focusing on all the other things, right? Like more on what's happening than on who it's happening to or who's saying stuff. So, for instance, in this read through, I learned about Stormy that he's an incredibly compassionate person, right? Like when he shed all those tears when he learned the uh, fate of the, as far as he knew, Tilanamas, who went and blocked the rent in the warren. And I think about Crocus, he really grew on me this time. And there's a whole bunch of other characters like that about whom I'm noticing things. Like Lull he just says the most profound things. The children are dying. I just remembered that as a generic quote, but Lull says it, and he says a few other things besides that are really deep and meaningful, which I think I may have accidentally attributed to Duiker, because
Yeah.
Duiker's that person throughout the book. But I think giving it, I think it's just not true that the characters are cardboard cutout. Like it is, there is some fatigue, I'm sure, from during a first read, like just from trying to track so many of them. But once you lose that, every character does stand out and have something different. And it's not like a tropey, like strange, weird thing. It is sometimes, like Pust has his thing that he does, but but the ones that stand out in different ways, like people do, like you'd say about someone, oh, that guy, he's really sweet, or like he's really compassionate, and so on. Like I'm starting to notice things like that about characters, which is interesting. And yeah, that's it. That's my 2-minute rant based on a 1-star review.
Yeah, it is definitely a fool's errand to argue with people who aren't here and probably have made up their minds. But I'm with you, because I've seen that over the years, that criticism a lot about Malazan, that the characters are all two-dimensional and that there are too many of them, and therefore they are flat. And I've seen people who don't like how characters are characterized in this series. When some people are like, oh, that there's just so much scope, blah blah blah, like people give like this weak defense, and then the critic's response is like, well, there are people who characterize people in like a short story or in a page, and I just think all of that is just misguided and is like you said, Varsha, is just not true. I don't know that Steven Erikson bats 1,000 with characters, but no one bats 1,000 with characters. There are like Robin Hobb, I think, is the best character writer in the fantasy genre, and she has characters who are not deep or are a little too, archetypal or whatever. But it is remarkable how much depth there are to even minor characters like Lul. I think that's a great example, who's someone I definitely, on my first read, looked right over. And I think Eriksen is a master of that, where all these side characters who have no right to have the depth they do, have details, have traits that maybe they happen in passing, right? Because they're not driving the plot, but it's there. Like, these characters are complex. Like Crocus, he so easily could come across as just like an archetype, but he's not. Or Apsalar, for that matter. Or Felisin. I mean, God, I don't know how you could read this book and not read Felisin and think that there is a ridiculously rich, complex character. I like that. To me, that person is just like talking out of their ass at that point, where even if you feel like there are a lot of weaker characters, inevitably you have to think that there are at least some extraordinary characters in this series and in this book. And I could not disagree more with anyone who thinks Eriksen can't characterize people. It's just handled differently, right? And I think the big problem isn't even how subtle sometimes he is, because it's not like I don't think these people are like stupid for not seeing it. It's just, I think they genuinely get so caught up in trying to understand how everything works that they don't notice the characters existing right in front of their eyes. I think that that happened to me when I first started Gardens. I know for like the first half of Gardens, I had like a few characters I just kind of like latched onto for like kind of not vain isn't the right word, but vapid reasons. Because I was so obsessed with trying to understand the world and why everything was happening and what was going on. And that's when you have to kind of just like relax, because if you stress about it too much, you will miss what's happening right in front of you.
Yeah, and I think Eriksen is incredible at characterization. When he does those squads of soldiers together, and he differentiates each one often within the same page. I think it's really incredible how he does it. And I understand the complaint about too many characters.
Absolutely.
I get that, and if you have trouble keeping track of them, that's completely understandable. But to say he doesn't have characterization is way off base, because I've seen passages where he puts more characterization into more characters on a single page than some people have in a whole book. And so it's there. If you look at it, it's there.
Yeah, you very shortly and eloquently put what I was trying to say, Jared. It's like, if it's just like too many characters, like, yeah, absolutely. Like, it is hard to keep track of all of them, especially on a first read. Even like this is actually my third read of Deadhouse Gates, and I am still, like Lowell is a character who's like really stood out to me this time. Inevitably, there are just things you miss. That's okay, but like to make this like wide complaint that like he just doesn't know how to write characters is absurd.
Well, just remember this: every throne is an arrow butt.
Yes,
That's
Kellenwood. That's Kellenwood characterized. I'm sorry. In one sentence.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
That tells you so much about him.
I gotta take off.
Now, Jared, the sleep warden's got to take him.
See you, Jared. Yeah. And there was this essay. Just briefly before we move on. There was an essay that he had on his website that's no longer alive. But he talked about characterization and how I guess the sentence that stood out to me from that essay was, "A bit part does not mean a bit life." So you shouldn't have your characters just like do things that serve the purpose of the other characters, or like that. But yeah, I feel like the characters that we came across here really embody that. Everybody that I remember feels deep. I don't know if, and I think we largely stay with characters in this one. We don't meet anyone for like 2 minutes and then we're done. That happens in later books, but even those, I feel like he does a decent job with most of them, maybe all of them.
Amen.
Cool. Sorry, did we finish talking about the Deadhouse Gates? We lost Shannon, but I guess when he comes back, we'll do Dasimulter's daughter.
Yeah, I was going to say we finished chapter 19 and we haven't even gotten to chapter 20.
Yeah.
I do want to say before, I know we're nearing the end of Steve's time. We got maybe 20 minutes. What did we talk about your thing, Steve?
Yeah, I just that one little word really threw me off the end of chapter 19. Yeah. It all makes so much more sense now.
I'm curious. We've already talked about this a little bit, but Steve, I know you've expressed at times like difficulty tracking all the characters, and so I'm curious for you, who are the characters who've stood out to you? Like, who are the ones you mentioned? Felisin, you've been a staunch defender of hers, and I am with you on that. I mentioned Crocus. Who are your favorite characters?
In this one, probably, Felisin is one of my favorites. This time, one character that I didn't really kind of forgot about is Duiker.
Yeah.
And I must have missed a lot, because Duiker is, that whole plot line is one that I've really been enjoying, probably more than all of them this time. I feel like it's very it can be tough to read, but it's also I don't think I picked up on all the different on the way that he explores battles and the effects of war and who suffers because of it, and all the different, all the refugees who die, and the other soldiers with him, that, the effects that all of it has. The one that's, I forget the name, but there was one who was like shaking and couldn't, or just like the anticipation of this battle that they have to, he has a routine of how to prepare for a battle, but then you prepare and then you have to wait. And all that's kind of it's like a wartime story of it packed in this fantasy book. It feels very grounded.
Absolutely. No, that's a great scene you mentioned that I'd forgotten about until you pointed out. But when I was reading it, that hit me really hard too. That you have this preparation. You're trying to get yourself psyched up. You're trying to get yourself ready for this battle, and then you just have to wait. And how unbearable that is. How hard that is. That was a great scene. I'm glad you mentioned that. So let's talk about chapter 20, which we really, I think the big thing that happens. Oh, Shannon is back.
There we go, back.
All right, after some technical difficulties, we got you back, Shannon. So I know you are someone who held on to, remembered rather, that Salkalan is Pearl, and I completely forgot about it. So we mentioned this a bit in the forum, and so I am curious about your reading of this. Like, what did that impact your reading at all? Did you enjoy the character Salkalan more? Because Pearl, I will say, is a character I love, but I guess I should say I love him for reasons I can't actually really explore yet. But what are your thoughts about all of that?
I think, I mean, last time I, didn't know who this was, because I don't think there's any reason you would know. You couldn't really, it'd be a pretty good guesser to guess it. Second time through, know who it is. I think it made me more impatient during those parts of the boat earlier when they're fighting the pirates. I'm like, come on, let's just get to the end. Like, come on, I know who Sulk is. Like, I know who the captain really is. Like, I just want to get to these reveals, and so we can move on with the story.
Yeah.
Which I was actually way more excited about the reveal of the captain. Like, that one I was like chomping at the bit the last couple of weeks waiting for him to come out with his name.
Yeah. Interesting.
Wait, did he tell us his name? I didn't catch that if he did.
His first mate started, he called him Carthur or something, and then he cut him off. And it was like, no, I drowned, remember?
Oh, right.
So,
okay.
He's and earlier in the book we'd heard about the Admiral Carthur and Crust, who had drowned in outside of Aaron. I think it was Aaron.
Oh, interesting.
So he's one of those Malazan old guards that, like, then that's, that just really interests me. Like, I really want to know more about these guys, like, that formed this empire.
I agree. I also missed that, Varsha, so you are definitely not alone there. I mean, like I said, this is my third time reading the book, and I did not. That was just went right over my head. But thank you again, Shannon, for mentioning that, because that is really cool. I do love how all of that kind of sequence ends. Like, for how bored I was by most of the voyage, I think it ends in a really exciting, really dramatic way. With like the demon fire, and it's and Kalam's. It's all. He almost seems like he's like dead. And it's just expertly done, very tense. I was on the edge of my seat reading that. I really enjoyed it.
Love the and I think this is just something I love in general, when characters feel confused or ill or whatever, and it turns out that they aren't wrong. All along something bad was being done to them. I think a little bit we encountered a little bit of that in Cloud Atlas, for instance, but this one just sort of like it read to me a little bit like Cloud Atlas on steroids, the bit with the ship, the captain on the ship. But
Yeah.
and I like this with the whirlwind too, this idea that you can move a subset of an area within a warren. When Felisin reveals to Heberic that the whirlwind has been moving all along, I thought that moment was brilliant. And similarly, like with this, we find out indirectly, I think, that Pearl has done something to move them within a war to a different destination than they intended.
I also just want to touch on. Oh my god, my brain completely shut down. This is going to be embarrassing. Listening to this. Anyway, any other thoughts about Sokolon? I had something I was going to say, but I forgot.
Yeah. No, I couldn't remember when he left Lostara behind. Did we see that scene, or
No.
did we just find out here?
We just found out.
No,
Okay.
the Red Blades arrested her.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Really? When did that
Yeah,
happen?
under the orders of
I don't remember
Pormqual.
that.
Or not the Red Blades, I'm sorry, the city guard. He said all the Red Blades were being arrested
Right.
when they finally got to Aaron.
We were told that, and then we saw Red Blades being dealt with, but did we see her being arrested? I thought that happened off page.
It may have happened off page.
No, I vaguely remember her being taken into custody of some sort. I think she reports to the chief of the Red Blades there, and it turns out that the Red Blades have been held in contempt or something, and
Yeah.
so they arrest her, I think, or at least withhold her. Like, she can't go out again.
I will say that does give you a little more faith in the Malazan military structure when absolute nut jobs like the Red Blades actually get some comeuppance, get some justice, you know? Like, they're not just allowed to be horrible. I mean, they get away with shit for a long time, but that at least that they're at a certain point, there's accountability.
They get comeuppance from Pormqual. I mean, are we really... Who are we supporting here?
In this specific situation, Pormqual. Because I think the Red Blades did need to be dealt with. I mean, do you think they commit a horrible massacre at the start of this book?
But do you think that's
zealots
why
themselves?
Is that why they got held back though? Like, that feels incidental. I think he just didn't want them to go help Coltaine.
I agree.
That's a fair question. That's a fair question. I mean, that is probably why they got held back, but we'll see how the rest of this book plays out, because I don't remember all the details.
That was the Red Blades up in Hissar. Maybe the Red Blades down in Aaron were not as awful.
That's fair. You know that there's definitely a level of, it's open, but we're given like epigraphs even about how they are like a cult of like bloodthirsty warriors. So my sense is that these guys are nut jobs, but you're right. We haven't seen them in Aaron. Maybe they're more moderate. Maybe they're chill. I don't know. So that's fair. I don't like the Red Blades. Lostara is the only Red Blades who I'm okay with, which that's for complicated reasons. But anyway.
It's complicated, meaning something happens later in the series that we can't talk about.
Shh. Nope, she's gone. She's never coming back.
Well, we aren't told that she died.
She got arrested. She's done.
Yeah, she's going to prison, and she'll spend her life in there, and she will rot, and that's justice.
Right.
Anyway, do we want to talk about? Oh, that's what I was going to touch on. Something so I kind of skipped around actually. The Moby stuff happens. Moby comes back in chapter 19, and then in chapter 20 we get the farewell. And what also happens though is as they're trying to get into the Azath house, because they can't get in at first. Freaking Ikarium is just screaming. He's just like constantly screaming. I love it. He is terrifying. The visual of that he's just out of control, and it's just like a possessed little girl in a horror movie is just like, I love the word they use, keening, that Eriksen uses, keening. Like it is just such haunting imagery. So that's what I wanted to say, was I just love that. The amazing detail on Eriksen's part adds so much tension.
And it's not even that he's, standing on his own 2 feet or whatever. Mappo's carrying him, and he's keening and about to come to consciousness through all of that. Yeah, I agree. I didn't. Yeah, that is quite terrifying because no one knows what will happen. Which again, like we've been made to be so terrified of Icarium's anger and loss of control so far that just being told that he's about to lose his shit is terrifying.
Absolutely. I think the way Eriksen writes, I mean, Icarium just in general as a character, it's excellent. But how he writes the terror, the horror that he creates in people around him, you know, the just absolute destruction he's capable of, and you know, the cost of him getting angry. It's just wonderful. It is, you know, it's the Incredible Hulk done in like the most raw, visceral way. I love it.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I would not have made the Hulk comparison, but now that it's there, I can't unsee it.
I guess the next thing, or sorry, Varsha, do you have something else you want to say about
go
that?
ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the next thing is the final farewells, right? That Coltaine takes his military and says, we're going to hold off the apocalypse. And Duiker, you have to live to tell the story, and you need to lead the refugees.
Yeah.
Go, take them to Aaron. Hopefully they will let you go in the walls. And it is so tense while you're not sure if they're going to be let in or not. And then they are let in. And then immediately you can tell things are wrong, right? All the soldiers are standing on the walls looking at them. And there are thousands of them. And they do not let anyone go back out. It's brutal. And God, going back to the farewell, sorry, rewinding a bit, but I got so sad. I knew this was coming. I didn't remember distinctly how or when it happened, but List deciding to go and fight to the death with everyone else is just brutal. And the way he gets taken out later is just so uneventful and sad. List was a character I really latched onto on this read. I just really got attached to him, and it just broke my heart. Everything there with him.
Yeah, List was great, and the separation. Duiker thinking about how he would have liked to say goodbye, and then rationalizing about how that would have felt fake. No, we need to just move on now. Yeah, and I think Coltaine says about none of this matters if there's no one to tell the story. That it's not individual people who need to be preserved, but the memories of them. Which, again, in the context of we discussed several times, and it has come up in the book, the layering of civilizations and the building of one on top of the other, and perhaps what the loss of memory of each one of those has done to the next iteration of civilization. I think in that context, I think that is a brilliant thing to say.
Yeah, and that, you know, the notion of the historian as the witness, right, as the one who has to tell the story of what happened here, I think so often, at least in my mind, when I think of historians, like archetypally, I think of them, you know, nobly in the sense of like a scholar, you know, someone driven by knowledge, and someone who, you know, often propaganda gets mixed into history, and that's its whole thing. But like in the noblest idea, like telling a truth about what happened, about the past, recounting the past. But I think this touches on another way of viewing them that's equally as noble and equally as powerful, which is as this witness, as someone living who has to tell the story of what happened here, not out of some sense of truth or propaganda, but just for the people who went through it, just to tell their story. That is so powerful.
Yeah, and there's such great imagery too for how he goes about that, right? Like when he climbs up on that hill to, like, in, I guess, very much in the line of fire, but he's like, I need to witness this, I need to tell the story. So he takes his role just as seriously, if not himself, but Coltaine also understands why that is important and keeps involving him in everything, and he's the one he chooses to save in the end. So, I'm sorry, Shannon, were you about to say something?
No.
Okay.
Keep going.
Yeah, but that was it. Like, did you have any additional thoughts on that?
Oh, I mean, chapter 21. I mean, I think this is why this chapter is largely why I think people like this book. I mean, this is just such a brutal chapter. It's the ending. One thing I latched onto a bit this time was Squint. The sniper that has to kill Coltaine. I didn't really remember seeing him here. I was like, wow, that's how much it messes him up to be the one that has to kill him, even though it needed to happen, because otherwise that mage was killing all the crows and they were at risk of him not being able to have his soul saved.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Carl.
I was just going to say another example of excellent, just the craft, the dramatic tension that Eriksen creates in that scene from the beginning of, the gradually rising dread that you feel as they enter Erin, that should be a moment of relief, but it's not. You don't get to let out a breath, and getting to Pormqual and fucking Malak looking all kind of like snivelly, and Malak calm, and Pormqual is like afraid. He doesn't seem guilty. He seems like he's afraid of someone like Duiker harming him or coming at him over this. But them observing the massacre that happens, the final massacre, and then the Squint coming up, right, being dragged and told shoot him, and the drama of him firing the arrow and immediately thinking, oh no, my shot was off, I missed. And also that he says, I'm aiming for Coltaine's chest, because that is the biggest part of him, right? That's the common archery thing, right? Common was shooting too, like guns. Like you aim for the chest because that is the biggest, easiest part to hit. There's a lot of vital, organs there. So he aims, he thinks he's off, and he is off. He messed up his shot and hits Coltaine right in the head, killing him instantly. And the release that comes with that. But, it's also, it's painful because Coltaine is dead, and poor Squint is traumatized knowing that he's the man who killed Coltaine. It is just incredibly moving and wonderfully written. I don't think there's anything you could change, not a single word about that. It is just a perfect scene.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And there's so much about that was so brilliantly done. When Nil and Nether wail over the fact that they won't let him just die, and
Yeah.
Corbolo Dom knowing exactly what he was doing by killing all the crows and not letting him die. Why? Like, that seems like such a cruel thing to do. And I mean, the Kundal, for instance, they just come back and have this sort of very objective respect for Coltaine, whereas Corbolodom, he seems to have no sense of the dignity that with which they've been conducting themselves. I think that Coltaine has been leading, and I guess before that we have Duiker noticing all these people who are sort of surrounding Coltaine and trying to defend him, right? Because and this is all Duiker's thought process, but it makes sense that they are defending the leader who brought them this far, so close to the gates, and they're not going to make it. And yeah, from Nil and Nether's wailing to Squint, when he shows up, he's just being very matter of fact that he needs to put someone out of their misery, and it's a mercy shot that he's taking, but his perspective on that suddenly changes. Like, it's even though nothing about the situation has changed, knowing that it's Coltaine that he has to kill, how that traumatizes him, I think that's brilliant and says so much. And finally, the biggest part of it all for me was the crows. I remember feeling so much awe for just how powerful Sormo Inat must have been for needing 11 crows to carry his soul off over as many days. And Coltaine has enough crows that it looks like it looks like clouds from the distance. There's so
Yeah.
many crows, it feels like a swarm of flies from where Duiker is looking. And I mean, I guess there's like two potential interpretations, right? Like one, that he is already someone who is I guess a very significant personality who was reborn, and his deed sort of added to it. But I think just I would like to think that just what he did in this life, in this iteration, brought him, like, added the weight that he needed to the soul for to need that many crows to carry him off.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. No, I think all of this is underlined by, I'm sure I'm far from the first person to mention the extreme amount of Christian imagery in Coltaine's The End of His Story. That the most obvious of which is he's crucified, literally, but on top of that, this is a moment of ascension, right? That's kind of in the story of, Jesus Christ, that like he kind of ascends to heaven, when he dies in his martyrdom. But on top of that, this is something I didn't pick up on until this read through, that Coltaine was thrice denied. He was thrice denied. They were thrice denied entrance by Pormqual into Erin. There was the chance to save him, and 3 times he was denied. Which
I didn't pick up
directly
on that this time either.
parallels, Peter's thrice denial of Jesus. And I mean, it's just like point after point. Eriksen is using this imagery, this this story that is particularly known in the West, to add mythic, emotional, thematic significance to Coltaine's story. I mean, because in other ways they couldn't be more different, right? Like Coltaine is a warrior.
Yeah.
And, Jesus famously like a hippie carpenter. But at the same time, both of their stories are, right, ultimately about like the noblest ideals of like humanity and like redeeming people in some way, right? Coltaine redeems all of these imperialists by literally working with them to save the lives of tens of thousands of innocents who are caught up in just the most horrific atrocity. And he's made into a god for it. He becomes, divine. He ascends for the sheer magnitude of his actions.
Yeah. That section was just quite something. I didn't think this chapter was, I think, among the shortest in this book. It was only 9 pages long in the trade paperback. The chapters preceding it were 25-30 pages, and I was so sure that it wasn't time for this event yet, but it was. And it took all of 9 pages to sort of bring the whole thing, I don't want to say rousing conclusion, but like to sort of slam the whole thing down after carrying it along so far,
Yeah. No, it's a perfect ending to that story. It really is. It's wonderful. And like I said, I can't imagine changing a word of chapter 21. It's just perfect.
Yeah. I mean, we see Bolt go down, we see List go down, and as far as I can tell, he's the last Marine left.
Yeah.
Which was perfect since he was the first Marine always killed during those exercises.
Oh, that's a great point.
And then,
I didn't even think of that. Oh, you're so right.
Was that
And
again? Sorry.
I said List was the last Marine to go down because the only
Oh,
other ones
that's
that are
right.
left are Crow Clan people.
Oh yeah.
And then after List, we see Bent go down because he's a good doggy. He's defending his boss, and he goes down.
Yes. Bent goes down. I wonder what happened to the lapdog.
Oh
I
God,
don't
yeah,
know.
that lapdog is toast.
When we meet the engineers and the captain gets complimented on how he's got extremely good
Yes, the
aim,
rocks.
and he's like, "Yeah, but there's this lapdog that I've been failing to kill."
Yeah, and he carries around a backpack full of rocks because he's trying to hit the lapdog.
Yeah.
That is hysterical.
Yeah. Yeah. That is, I think, one of the best things in the entire series. That
Yeah,
scene.
it absolutely is.
Best written. I mean, it's a horrible thing that happened, but
No, in this household, we cheer
agree.
Coltaine's death. Justice for Pormqual.
justice for Pomko. Yes.
Make it a hashtag. Make it go viral.
Pormqual did no wrong.
Exactly.
But
Malik Rell was
man.
right.
Malik Rell was right.
Malik Rell was right. Oh man, what a scumbag! What?
Yeah, he sucks.
I
did that like that last line, or almost last line in chapter 21, where Duker's gaze returned to Pormqual. The Hyphus seemed to shrink into Malik Rell's shadow. He shook his head as if to deny the day.
Yeah.
That is great.
Oh, and then there's what you were saying, Carl. Thrice denied, Hyphus.
I didn't know that reference.
There you go.
That's a good call. Thank you.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to share it, because it's very intentional, right? Like, it's one of those things. I completely missed it first 2 times, but that's definitely like the crucifixion I picked up on. But the thrice denied is like, it's right there, but easy to miss.
Yeah. So, other stuff that happens in these chapters, just briefly. We already talked about Felisin.
Do you guys want to talk about Felisin?
Yeah.
There was a little bit of her in her camp.
Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Felisin with the whirlwind, and is she
The little girl?
And the little girl at her feet, which, that reminds me of the other kind of sort of parallel I wanted to discuss. Apt adopting that boy and making and the conversation between her and Cotillion about, I think if I understood correctly, the conversation they have is Cotillion says, "How the hell do you think you're going to bring this kid up?" And she says, "You're going to help me." And he says, "That's not going to go very well because he'll not know who he belongs to or whatever. Or humans will help me." One of those. And he's sort of acquiring this apt related personality. He's human, but he's also slightly apt, and he understands the mother, which Felisin, with the child that she's adopted sitting at her knees, will be interesting to see how that goes. And also we find out Keneb has been put in charge of a child, so a lot of adoption of kids happening in this book. So and I guess they all, as must happen with children, I suppose, they all infuse their own personalities into the child. Perhaps we don't know yet about the child that Felisin has and the kid that Keneb.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Duiker picked up that grubby little kid and gave it to
yes,
gave it to Keneb.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, one thing talking about panic here, in Cotillion, one thing I am picking up on this reread is Cotillion. I don't know, like there's more to him than I think I originally saw. And how he shows up here and he's talking to Apt, and I don't know what does I mean, is compassion? I don't know. There's like
Yes.
he cares a lot more, I think, than I realized. about other people, which I think I just originally wrote, he was the patroness of assassins, and I just thought of him as, oh, well, he's an assassin. And we saw him as sorry. But I really like what we're starting to see of Cotillion.
Yep, I
Yeah.
agree with you. I think it was about book 5 or 6, I forget when, but there was one cotillion conversation with some other character that made me realize that there is so much to him that that was one of my I want to read all the Path to Ascendancy books moments. But it is evident as early as this book. You're right. Like I definitely did not notice it in Deadhouse Gates last time around.
Yeah, I think the way that Eriksen characterizes both Shadow Throne and Cotillion is really interesting because they're introduced very much as these like creepy. They're gods of shadow, right? Like they're god of assassins. That these are things that in typical fantasy you associate with bad guys, right? And at the same time as all of that is being built up, everyone talks about Kellen Ved and Dancer as these mythic figures, these like almost noble figures, particularly in contrast to Felisin, who everyone is very critical of and seems to revile. And while that is happening, it's not just the imagery, it's like Shadow Throne and Cotillion do horrible, evil shit. Like they are bad guys in the first book entirely, and
the first thing we see is them
second
wipe
book
out a
partially.
village.
Exactly. And so you have this interesting, particularly knowing the context of who they are, this dichotomy established between the stories told about them and then who they really are. And it creates this like it's not cognitive dissonance, but like it's something you have to reconcile with as a reader, right? And I do think you see here in Deadhouse Gates for the first time the greater depth to these characters. And like with many people, I think they lie somewhere in between the best and the worst of what they have done. I mean, they're both. They're both these monsters who can be incredibly cold-hearted and arrogant, and also they're capable of taking a bunch of crucified children under their wings and raising them.
Yeah, yeah. And I like the air with which they do it, right? Like at least with Kellen, where it was a distant disinterest, but then he gives in, and it's almost like with the air of he's putting up this fight, but he doesn't really believe in it. He knows he's going to give in eventually, and Cotillion seems slightly more accepting than Kellenwood is, and maybe just that difference between those two sort of brightens Cotillion's seeming compassion in this instance a bit more. But yeah, I love how he departs, and first Panic says he notices things from the realm that used to be, and then when Cotillion disappears in shadows, he Panic asks Apt, like, does he think he's invisible now? Is that what we're supposed to believe? That's funny. Yeah, I think the last thing was Felisin. What did we want to talk about her? We already talked about Whirlwind as Warren, which is bloody brilliant.
Yeah, that's
I
super
was
cool.
wondering, like, because Duiker kept saying, like, he kept noticing the whirlwind, and I'm like, how can they still see that? I thought they must be far away from it. Must be really high in the sky if he's seeing it. But I guess the more reasonable explanation, now that we know what's going on, is that maybe it's been following them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that is what's up, but all of that stuff, it's awesome.
Read.
I don't have anything else to add here. Yeah.
That seems reasonable.
I mean, they talk a little bit about Lorik, or Laoric.
Yeah.
I mean, that was about it.
True.
Yes.
He's the mystery. The other two are straight up bad.
They think they're subtle, but not really. You can handle
Yeah,
them.
it's so true.
Yeah. I like that. Overhead. Oh. Okay, are we ready to do quotes? Because I have a good one to start us off with.
Yeah. Hit us with it.
Okay. Overhead, the sky had begun to die. What a brilliant, brilliant. Like, this was just as Coltaine had died. And
That is awesome.
I think this has been a very brilliant through line for me. Dwicker's observations of the surroundings in conjunction with his mood and how he interprets the environment based on what's happening or how he's feeling. And this one, I think this line about the sky beginning to die,
that is beautiful. That's
yeah.
powerful. Yeah. My only quote is I do want to highlight the epigraph of chapter 21, which we've already mentioned, but it is just so good that it's worth saying twice. Every throne is an arrow butt. Kel and Vet.
Yes.
Such a good quote. It's just chef's kiss, perfection.
I agree. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, well, one I had that I liked was about the Talana Mass back in chapter 19.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of, yeah, it was this section here. It says, the souls of the Talana Mass cannot join Hood, cannot even flee their prison of bone and withered flesh. One does not bury such things. That sentence of earth and darkness offers no peace. Instead, let these remnants look out from their perches upon one another, upon the rare mortal passages of this trail. And that was about how when the Talana Master get too broken to continue, they're buried by being kind of placed up on trees and stuff in this forest because they're still there. Like they can't die, so they're still, even though they can't move, they can't talk, they can't do anything, they can just look.
That is haunting.
At least they can look at things, which is horrible.
Yeah, it's horrible. And again, like, given the time scales we're talking about, right? 200,000 years. That is, I can't even begin to think about just how long that is.
No.
That's horrifying. Yeah. Yeah. The worst of human nature.
Yep. Emacian nature, but also
Well,
human
yes.
nature.
Also human nature. Yes. No, fair enough.
And then this line was just hauntingly beautiful about the Imas. They created a ritual that would make them immortal, free to blow like the dust. And in the age of ice, there was plenty of dust.
That's good.
Yep. That's it. Those are my questions. I have a lot more, but I'm not going to go on for another 20 minutes. Cool. Anything else? Any closing thoughts? We get to the end of the book next week.
No, I don't think so.
I'm excited. Yeah. We got Eriksen soon. As a reminder to listeners, we will have Eriksen on the podcast very soon, later this month.
Yes.
So please send us your questions if you have questions.
Yes. You can do that either on the YouTube comments for my or Steve's channel, or send us. There's an email address on the YouTube channel if you like. If you're on the forum, of course, you know where to find us. Or consider checking out the forum if you aren't already there. That's it.
Perfect.
Cool, then. We will see everybody next week with the end of Deadhouse Gates. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.